After his first phone call with Donald Trump and the renewed bombing of Syria, Vladimir Putin turning to domestic matters. The Russian president disowning the economic development minister after the highest level arrest Moscow has seen since the 1991 failed coup. Alexei Ulyukayev charged with extorting a $2 million bribe out of state oil company Rosneft. Crusade against corruption, or a casualty of the Kremlin rivalry between military and intelligence brass and the suits working to keep Russia open for business in these times of sanctions and low oil prices. More broadly, now that Donald Trump has been elected U.S. president, will it be win-win and a toning down of rivalries all around in places like Eastern Europe and Syria? Putin's fiercest critics feel he'll have free rein, while others still wonder that it may not be so convenient for Russia if the U.S. is no longer the bogeyman to rally opponents to Moscow's cause. And then, of course, there's Mr. Trump himself. Just who ends up whispering in his ear when it comes to defense and foreign policy is anyone's guess after his own latest purge in the transition team. Today in the FOURQUET debate, we're looking at the movement in Moscow. With us, he's a former German ambassador to NATO, Joachim Bitterlich. Welcome back to the show.
Good evening.
Thanks as well to journalist Dmitry Dekochko. Nice to see you
Good
again.
Evening.
Alexei Ulyukayev of human rights advocates Russie Liberté.
Good evening.
How you translate that? Russia Freedom or Russia Liberties?
Russian Liberties.
Russian Liberties, okay. And from the U.S. Capitol, Anna Borshchevskaya of the Washington Institute think tank. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
The FOURQUET debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. He faces up to 15 years behind bars. Alexei Ulyukayev, a 60-year-old political veteran, seen up to now as a safe pair of hands. Rodaba Abbas has more.
A dismissal for breach of trust and abuse of office. Russia's economy minister Alexei Ulyukayev has been charged with corruption by President Vladimir Putin. He is accused of accepting a bribe worth $2 million, involving a takeover between two major national oil companies. Investors say he agreed to authorize a deal last month between state-owned energy giant Rosneft and Bashneft after accepting the amount. The transaction, worth $5.2 billion, came after months of wrangling among Russian ministers and exposed deep divisions in the cabinet. Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, who favored private investors for the deal, is calling for a thorough investigation.
This is a difficult event for the government and the cabinet. What's happened is beyond my understanding. The only conclusion from this is that neither a minister, nor a deputy, nor a governor, or any other authority can have immunity if they have committed crimes of corruption.
Rosneft insists the deal with Bashneft will not be sabotaged by the scandal. Its CEO, Igor Sechin, a close ally of President Putin, had pushed for the acquisition. But critics are questioning the motivation for Ulyukayev accepting the bribe.
We need to see how the case unfolds and whether it will develop any further. But there is no doubt of the fact that there are certain elements of internal government games.
Ulyukayev is the first Russian minister to be arrested since the fall of the Soviet Union 25 years ago. He now faces a jail sentence of up to 15 years.
By the way, Alexei Ulyukayev may not be the only one. They look like long faces at the cabinet meeting in Moscow this Wednesday, as newspapers carried several stories saying ministers and aides close to Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev may now be drawn into the same case, adding they too were allegedly under surveillance. Dmitry Dekochko, let's start with this case. Do you think he tried to extort $2 million from the head of Rosneft?
I don't know. Anyway, what you can say surely is that he has been trapped. Now, why? By whom? Of course, the rule of Sechin seems to be important. The rivalry between the clan in which is Ulyukayev and in which is Sechin are different clans, and they do not agree on the policy.
Yeah, we're getting into
it is a very bad thing anyway for the politicians in Russia, like it is very bad here when we have such cases of corruption at a such high level. Now, it's the first time it's a minister which is accused of corruption in Russia, as far as I know. And of course, it seems it means that they have decided to make a repression against corruption.
Do you think it is repression against corruption? Do you think it's genuine?
I think, well, it may be genuine, yes. It is allegedly, of course.
Because
it may be genuine and happily, yes.
Let's look at one reaction, that Ulyukayev could twist the arm of Igor Sechin, the boss of Rosneft, a close Putin ally, leaves many incredulous. Note the reaction of Alexander Shokin. He's president of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs. One has to be insane to threaten Rosneft a month after the deal received the formal legal and political approval and to extort $2 million from Igor Ivanovich Sechin, de facto one of the most powerful people in this country. Alexei Prokofiev, your reaction?
Yeah, what is really interesting is why it's happening now. The role of Igor Sechin, because we have to remember how Igor Sechin became the boss of Rosneft, how he became a billionaire, who helped him to become a billionaire. And also, in Russie Liberté, in our NGO, we issued a report 2 years ago about corruption in Russia, which shows, as also reports by other NGOs like Transparency International, but our report shows that today, nowadays, corruption in Russia is in every level. It's everywhere. Corruption in Russia is everywhere. Every level of administration is infected by corruption.
So do you agree with Dmitry Dikochko? This could be a good news story, crackdown on corruption?
Well, I don't know. I don't really think so, because what's going on is that every level is infected by corruption, and also there is a huge economic crisis in Russia. Inflation is high, the inequalities are high, ruble is still on not such a good level. So the economic crisis is really severe in Russia, and the demand from the public opinion for fight against corruption is high. So isn't it just symbolic? Like, if corruption is everywhere, you can't put everybody in the government in jail, so you have to choose only one symbolic case and to put him and to blame it on him. And also, what was already said in this report is that there are battle between clans, which is sometimes exaggerated, but we sometimes speak about the towers of the Kremlin. So inside this battle between the towers, there could be also some interests from one tower to try to weaken the other one.
Anna Borshchashskaya, do you believe that he extorted $2 million from the head of Rosneft?
Well, I certainly, again, we don't know, but I certainly find it hard to believe that somebody really would try to extort money from Igor Sechin. Again, look, we don't know. Corruption, indeed, I agree, is prevalent everywhere in Russia on all levels. There's no doubt about that. I do find it a little bit suspicious in the context in which this has happened. Ulyukayev is part of one of the few people remaining in the Russian government who are part of Yegor Gaidar's team, Yegor Gaidar, who tried to liberalize Russia's economy in the 1990s, bring free market reforms. It could certainly also be a signal to the more liberal members that are still left in the Russian government or more broadly in the Russian society. Again, given the state of the Russian economy, it is possible that Putin is looking for some ways to create some kind of a show trial in some ways in an attempt to gain legitimacy. Again, look, it's hard to tell. I find it pretty suspicious.
Break it down for us, for those who don't watch Russia very closely. What are the different competing teams, if you will, inside of the Kremlin?
Well, what we've seen, what's interesting, what we've seen most recently is that Putin has reshuffled his cabinet, people closest to him who have been with him for a while. We just, at the same time, we just had an election in Russia for the Russian Duma, that is the Russian parliament, the lower house of parliament, where Putin's party, United Russia, won a supermajority. Which is a major signal, because now that Putin's party has a supermajority, he can effectively this is enough effectively to change the Russian constitution. So there's very few real political opposition left to Putin. For example, there's still a communist party, the far right sort of token
But the question
opposition.
I'm asking is, when you see, for instance, the stories in the Russian press that there could be others close to the Prime Minister, Dmitry Medvedev, who could be in trouble. Is that true, or was this just a one-off to keep everyone off guard?
Again, you know, it's hard to tell. It's honestly just hard to tell. The Russian system has become so closed. There's so many rumors. Look, it's certainly possible. It's certainly possible that if it's people around Medvedev, but again, it's hard to tell. We just don't know.
Joachim Bitterlich, your thoughts?
We are not in the secrets of the FSB in the story. But in my eyes, it seems to be a warning shot against what we call the system liberals within the government. And there they have found what you would call an easy scapegoat. You know that Ulyukayev is a poet, not only a banker, not only an administrator, but a poet. And
Lavrov too.
I translate to you what I've read this morning in the German press. One of his poems, which should be suspicious for, at least for FSB, perhaps for others too. And I quote, in my personal translation, "Travel, my son, travel far away from here, to a place where one step forward does not mean 500 steps backwards, and where the convoy is not always hunting for small people."
I learned, preparing for the show, an expression I didn't know, which is this. They talk about the Siloviki faction. What is that? Explain that.
I'm not a Moscowite. I'm not one of those who is only looking through the eyes, but you have different fractions within Moscow. And you have your Solovikis. Igor Sechin is one of the most exponents of them, or the head, if you want, extremely professionalized, extremely well established. And you have on the other side what you call a more liberal fraction, or more moderate or liberal fraction. And the most exponent is Medvedev, the prime minister. And therefore the question I raise is, isn't this a warning shot against Medvedev himself?
Why? Why send a warning shot to Medvedev? Isn't he a loyal foot soldier?
It's a loyal foot soldier, yes. But on the other hand, it's Putin is pushing towards a more coherent system. The system is under pressure, not only since yesterday, but for the last 5, 6, 7 years. And he has to show, let's say, some success stories in the fight against corruption. And there you have what I call an easy scapegoat. For me, it's an intrigue, more than a real story, probably. Because all my Moscow friends tell me the guy who would like to squeeze out or to use blackmail against Igor Sechin has to be born.
Dmitry Diklatko?
I wouldn't say it is successful, and it is very useful for the government,
No, this is another
the
story.
Russian government, to show that a minister.
Because when the
can
story
be
first
corrupted, then-
broke, it looked like, you know, like in China with Xi Jinping's corruption crackdown. It looked kind of like the same kind of scenario here. A big announcement showing the government's serious about tackling corruption. You said so yourself.
Yes, of course, but I've said, of course, they are tackling corruption, but the worst corruption for the opinion is not at this level. This level, we have corruptions like that in many governments. That is why Americans have elected Trump or were for Bernie Sanders, and that is why in France we have the same cases against politicians in general. The problem, the corruption in Russia, and I think in China too, is at each day level, you know. It's for every administration thing you have to do, you have to corrupt, or you have to buy something, or you have to, to go to find a way to get something when it is difficult to get. That is much worse than ministers. Ministers, it is happening in spheres which are not very touched and on which, in fact, people are not very concerned of. Of course, it's a problem of ethics and morality and all that, but it is exactly the same problem, I would say, in many other governments now, with other governments now.
It's not a favor to Putin's credibility.
Of course, that is why it is not success. Such a case is not a success.
No,
Alexei Ulyukayev.
Well, I think that we have to remind some things. First of all, the huge economic crisis, the demand from public opinion for some actions against corruption, and also the fact that Ulyukayev was in Panama Papers, and that linked him directly to Vladimir Putin. So we have also to ask ourselves, isn't it
expedient?
Isn't it a try from Vladimir Putin to protect himself and also to show once again to the Russian population that he has this strong hand and that he can punish the corrupted? But because the problem is not only one, don't make a hero from Mr. Ulyukayev. I don't think that he's a real, what we call liberal. Maybe he's a moderate. Of course, he's not from Siloviki. He was in Gaidar's government 25 years ago, it's a long time ago. But I think that it's also a try from that Vladimir Putin tries to show that he has a strong hand, but the problem is not only Mr. Ulyukayev, or the problem is not only Mr. Serdyukov, the former Minister of Defense, who was accused also of corruption, but he was pardoned by Vladimir Putin. The problem is the system. The Putin's regime, the Putin's system built in Russia, and it was built with Mr. Sechin and with other ministers and also with Mr. Medvedev. And this system is making, is building, is covering, is organizing corruption in Russia. It's not only Mr. Ulyukayev. So I think that it's maybe a protection maneuver, as you can say, and not really like original or not really a real try to fight against
a genuine
corruption.
effort to
genuine
tackle
effort,
corruption.
yes, I think.
When we come back in the France 24 debates, we're going to see how Vladimir Putin may be recalibrating on the world stage after the election of Donald Trump. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.